This year, the Arlington County Board could change its work status for its members from part-time to full-time. Our question tonight is, should it? For the sake of comparison, let's stack up Arlington's elected officials with those of other jurisdictions. Now, keep in mind that each jurisdiction has its own, is different in population, in geographic area, in complexity, the pressing issues that it faces, the delegation of work, and by which I mean what's handled by the elected officials versus the career staff, and so on. We see it here between Arlington and Northern Virginia counties, and between Arlington and the nearby counties in Maryland and the District of Columbia. And what you see is what you might expect. Some jurisdictions have full-time staff, some part-time, and the pay reflects those the status. Now, to my way of thinking, it's a nice comparison, but it really doesn't answer the question as to whether Arlington County boards should be part-time or full-time. And while I'm being honest, I don't believe we should rely on history as much of a guide. The county board dates back to 1932. There were 5 members then, and there are 5 members now, and 5 members ever since in those 87 intervening years. I suspect that they were part-time because there wasn't much to do, but I don't know. And just as a point of comparison, in 1930, the closest year to when the county board was formed, the population was 26,615. The estimate for 2 years ago was almost 235,000. So that's a 9-fold increase. Now, I'm not going to embarrass myself about all the changes that have been made in those 87 years, except to say that in 1930, there were 38 Arlingtonians who received pensions from the Confederate Army. So, things have definitely changed. Consequently, our needs may have changed. Is Arlington best served by elected officials who essentially must have other employment? That does force them to be exposed to what we encounter in our daily lives. Or are we better off with elected officials who are dedicated full-time to manage the issues and challenges that our counties that addresses our county's ever-increasing complexity? To answer this, we have two board members. Well, one current and one former county board member. First, Libby Garvey. She has been a county board member since 2012, and prior to that, she served 16 years on the Arlington County School Board. She has a very lengthy list of organizations that she has served on and accolades earned, which you can read at libbygarvey.com. Ladies and gentlemen, County Board Member Libby Garvey.
Thank you very much. So we'll get this figured out. Actually, it's only 15 years on the school board. Want to correct that. And now you're going to have to stay here so I find out what it is I push to make it advance. That, okay, good. And what goes back? That goes forward and that goes back. Got it. All right, we're good. It's not really the year where we decide whether we're full-time or part-time. It's when we can decide how much we get paid. The Virginia legislature has made it so the only time we can significantly increase our salaries is every 4 years when 2 of us run. The point is they want to make sure that those who increase their salaries have to face the ire of the voters so that it will make it less likely that you will increase your salary. So that's the way that's set up. And this year now is when 2 of our members are running for re-election. So they have to vote for getting an increase if that's what we decided to do. And by the way, None of my colleagues much are talking about this. This is just me personally speaking for me. But I've just been watching this all. I'm like in my 23rd year of service, and what I'm seeing is I think we need to have some changes. So I'm going to float it here, but I'm speaking for myself, not for the board. So I want to be clear about that. Okay. So, and I think the real question is, rather than a board for that, and I hope, oh boy, I hope we don't have the old, because that's not the title that it's supposed to be. The title that it's supposed to be is what kind of county board should we have? That's the question. So while I'm going through this, just think to yourself, what kind of county board should we have? All right, so let's start back in 1951. That's the year I was born. Seemed like a good year to start, and we had this picture. So there's Clarendon. Arlington was a sleepy little suburb, bedroom community for federal government workers. It was governed, as it had been since the 30s, as Timon mentioned, by 5-member part-time county board. They oversaw a budget and staff that were, as you can see, a fraction of the budget and staff we have today. Council of Governments didn't exist. Email didn't exist. Phones had cords and dials. Remember dials? And when people wanted to contact the county board, they generally sat down and they wrote us a letter. And in between here, actually, I had a nice slide on Arlington in the 1990s. So I'm trying to take you through time. So we did the 50s, 90s. Arlington was growing, beginning to really change with the advent of Metro in 96. Smart growth had begun to center development in our metro quarters. Our budget had grown, still a fraction of what we have today. Email did exist in the 90s, but hardly anybody used it. Most phones had push buttons, and they still had cords. And the county board overseeing this, of course, was still 5 members. And then today, here we go. I'll keep it on this slide. Today, Arlington is at the heart of an economic region that stretches from Baltimore to Richmond. The new way of economists looking at areas is looking at economic regions. This economic region that stretches from Richmond up to Baltimore, we're kind of at the heart of it, is the 3rd largest economy in our nation and the 7th largest economy in the world. So we're at the heart of the 7th largest regional economy in the world. We are in an era of email, mobile phones, social media, and people are available 24/7. We are still managing county with the same 5-member part-time board that we had back in the 1930s. So if you look at some of our neighbors, and you did see a picture of the Fairfax board there, our elected board, as Timon pointed out, is the smallest in the region, and we serve at large. So Fairfax is much, much bigger, right? But they have 10. They've got 9 board members and 1 chair, and they each have districts of 135,000 max. So each board member in Fairfax serves a district of 135,000, and all of the Arlington, we're expected to represent the entire county. It's 235,000. Each supervisor in Fairfax County has their own office center and a dedicated staff of about 5 people. And again, as I said, there are 10 of them. The supervisors earn about $95,000, which is a little bit, kind of almost double what we get. And we in Arlington are half their size. Each of us board members has 1 dedicated aide, and we share the rest of our staff. And as I say, we earn about half of what Fairfax does. Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., as we pointed out, 13 members on their council. They're somewhat, yes, a state legislature and a board combined, so you could give them that. But they have 8 wards, and those are much smaller than what we represent in Arlington. And they each get about $140,000 each. Now, Alexandria Falls Church, as you point out, they have larger boards again, but they do get paid much less than most places and less than what we do. So the question actually for the group here right now is one, do we think of ourselves as comparable to Alexandria Falls Church in regional importance, or do we think of ourselves in regional importance more like Fairfax, Montgomery County, and Washington, D.C.? So the next question is, how do we spend our time? And now I can go to the next slide that we've got here. There we go. So one of the things we do is legislating. And a lot of our hours per month are spent in these kind of regular meetings and work sessions and briefings. And this is when and how we tackle so much of what affects us here in Arlington directly. We decide, how high should a building be? Where do we want to park? How many libraries should we have and where should they be? How high should taxes be to pay for everything our residents want and yet not be too high so that people can't afford to live here? And I suspect everybody in this room thinks we don't quite get it right, but that is the balance we keep trying to make. So I was just wondering here, who here has ever talked to a board member about an issue important to you personally or to your neighborhood? Who here's ever talked to a board member? Okay, not quite as many people as I thought, because I thought it would be everybody. Great, thank you. We are accessible. Do feel free to call on us. And then I suspect that most people think about what we do pretty much as what's on this slide. But of course, if you think about it, you realize there are other things that we do. So we do constituent services. We have Open Door Monday. And I just need to get this here. How many of you have been to Open Door Monday? Not so many, but a few. Nia's really, you're very loyal to us there. So we're at, a board member is at a meeting place where anybody can come. Open Door Monday. It's the first 4 Mondays of the month, except for holidays, and we don't do August. And this is actually one of my favorite because you never know who's coming and what they're going to talk about. It's really interesting to see what comes. And if you've been to Open Door Monday, you see that the board member who's there listens, takes notes, and then we do try to get back to people and follow up on issues raised. Email is a constant in our lives. So how many of you have ever received an email from a board member? Anybody ever gotten an email from a board member? Yeah, a few. How many of you have ever received an email from a board member that was sent after 5 p.m.? After 10 p.m. On weekends? Yeah. I personally do a lot of my email between 10 and midnight because that's the time I have. And I think you will find, you may not, if you ever get an email from a board member that sent it out personally, and you look, you probably will see a date stamp that's a time stamp rather that's often pretty late because it's really the only time we have to do that. So Arlington, being Arlington, has lots of community organizations, which we've got here. We try to be available to all of them. I must assume a lot of you are in civic associations. How many of you have ever seen us as a board member at one of your civic associations? Oh, good. Yes, that's better. Yeah. And a community meeting. We attend meetings when we're asked. We try to attend galas and events. That's one thing you got to remember. All of these different organizations and things that go on, everybody's got like an annual gala, an event, a fundraiser that they do, and they'd like to have board members there. And we do try to come. But with 85 community organizations, 48 associations, that's a lot. Each board member liaises with multiple commissions, all of these things. The bids, that counts for business improvement districts. Many of these groups meet monthly. Now, we do not attend every meeting, generally, but we do try to attend at least 1 or 2 a year. And then we handle any issues that come up. And sometimes nothing happens that requires a board member's attention. Sometimes something does come up that can take hours to resolve. Sometimes it's important, sometimes it's fairly petty, but to the people involved, it's always really important. So regional leadership, that's not up here. I wish it were. It's 2 slides worth. And this is increasingly among the most important things that we do. It also kind of like didn't exist back in the 30s and 50s and some in the 90s. So remember that we're this economic region that's the 7th largest economy in the world, and we're at the heart. More and more, regional cooperation is crucial to the success of everybody in this region. And remember, there are only 5 of us. So while we split up these regional groups, there are not all that many of us to go around, and we each belong to multiple groups. And many of those groups, as I say, didn't even exist. Some of them just came into existence the early part of this century. Some of the groups require almost no involvement, although again, if there's a problem, suddenly they do. And I'll just give the example of Christian Dorsey, our chair, who also serves on the Metro Board. So Virginia has 2 representatives on the Metro Board. Christian is one, and they come from the NVTC, which is a group that I sit on, and Katie Crystal does as well. That Metro Board is really, really important. He figures, with all the things he did, he spent about 22 hours serving on his regional boards and groups in January. Okay, that's in addition to everything else we saw and trying to be chair of the board. I will say on the regional metro, it just shows a little difference. There's a real big difference politically in how Virginia does things and Maryland does things. So Virginia does not pay its representatives on the Metro Board. Maryland does. In fact, they pay their alternates. So the Maryland alternate to the Metro Board makes about $70,000 a year to be the alternate on the Metro Board and doesn't even necessarily come to all the meetings. Christian gets zip. And if you've been watching what's been going on with Jack Evans, who is the current chair of the Metro Board and on the DC City Council, he's having a lot of troubles. He might end up maybe not being chair of the Metro Board and some other things, I don't know. Next in line, in a lot of ways, could be Christian. And I've talked to Christian about it. I think it'd be great if Christian were chair of the Metro Board. I think the region thinks it's pretty great. He is really, really, really good. And I asked him, he said he'd love to do it, but he said, I can't. There's no way he could do that because he doesn't get paid hardly anything to do the county board, and he's chair, and he's got 2 small children and a job. And he's got to put food on the table, got to pay the mortgage, and he has to be saving for college. There's no way he can do it. So because the state of Virginia, or this region, refuses to pay people more than just a part-time salary, we're going to lose out a lot. And I think that's something to keep in mind. You might think a little bit about what it is we do. So, what does regional leadership mean? I mean, you go to a lot of meetings, but that's where we work with people in other jurisdictions to tackle big issues like transportation, climate change, affordable housing. And with the Amazon bid, we're all going for, this region really amped up its cooperation. And we've been working a lot. You'll see affordable housing and the Innovation Tech Center. We've been working a lot with Alexandria and are continuing to work with them. And I think regional cooperation is going to become more and more important, and not less important, as it should, for the 7th largest economy in the world, right, that we're the center of. So your part-time board is working really hard to maintain our influence and our leadership to these regional groups, where every jurisdiction has a larger board. All the major players have much higher salaries, so they don't have to struggle to make ends meet the way your board does. And Arlington is no longer that little bedroom community. We're at the heart of this economic region. The pace of change has picked up. It's very upsetting for people, and I understand that. And I think when you think about all the change we're going through, you need to think about who's there to manage that change, be available to you to help mitigate problems that arise in Arlington, listening to your concerns. I'd say it's your 5-member part-time county board. So we've had generational change here. So this is the current board. When I got on the board in 2012, everybody was baby boomers. Nobody had an outside job of any real significance. And now a mere 7 years later, I'm the only baby boomer left. I'm on a widow's pension. Bless my husband. I am so lucky to have it. Everybody else is trying to do a job. And several have families or are starting families. Did we tell Katie had her baby? Did you hear that? Katie had a baby boy, so everybody's doing fine. He just arrived a whole lot earlier than anybody expected. So you've got young people trying to balance things, everything. On this part-time side, did I say what I don't think I got to that. $55,000 is what a board member makes, and the chair makes approximately. At $55,000, that qualifies a family of 4, if that's your only income, for affordable housing support at less than 50% of the average median income. So that's what you're paying your county board. So you need to think about that. All 5 of us get paid what would qualify you for affordable housing at less than 50% AMI, average median income, and we are at the heart of the 7th largest regional economy in the world, trying really hard to to punch at our weight and above our weight with all of the regional players. And I will tell you, when it comes to the region, if we're not at the table working really hard, we could find we're on the menu. I think it's in our interest to make sure that your county board members can really participate fully, as I think we should, and I think at this salary we can't. So last slide, and who knows how much time I've taken now because we've had so much back and forth. I'm sorry. This is just a question for you. What kind of board do we want? I think we want a board that reflects our community. You're running out of baby boomers. So, John will talk a little bit. He was able to afford to do this. I can afford to do this. I think less and less people can. And in fact, you're going to get more and more very young people just starting out. But somebody sort of in the middle really starting to worry about college and retirement things, they're not going to be able to afford to do this unless they've been inheriting a lot of money. You want us to be accessible. You want us to provide oversight. And I think you want us to be planning for the future. With all of the change that's happening, I'll tell you, we are so busy sometimes, we're just trying to make up what's happening the next day or the next week. Hardly think ahead to the next month or the next year. But this board needs to be thinking ahead and working with you all and our community about where we want to be in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. Because if we don't work together and plan for where we want to be, we won't get there.
Next we have former county board member John Weisstadt. He was elected in the special election in the spring of 2014 and then re-elected that following fall. Hence, John might be the only person elected to the county board twice in the same calendar year. He has an equally long list of accomplishments to service organizations, which you can see at voteforweisstadt.com. Ladies and gentlemen, former county board member John Weisstadt.
Thanks very much, everybody. It's great to be back. I think my last trip up here was just last year, twice. Once last year and once in 2014 when I was a candidate. Anyway, the Committee of 100 is so essential to facilitating the civil discourse here in Arlington County. I think not only do we need to give Taman another hand, but I think all the current and former Committee of 100 board members and officers who are here tonight should stand and get some applause for these folks, okay? Come on. Okay, look at them. The other thing that I want to do tonight is really put out a call to everybody that in order for this organization to be sustained and to continue as it has for so many years, it's incumbent upon everybody in this room to go out tomorrow or the next day and recruit another member or two. Invite them to the next meeting. Reach out and really encourage people. Okay, so I'm thrilled to be on the program, as I said, and I've been up here 6 times, twice as a candidate, and the one that I'm most fond of, though, is when we gave a presentation for the Arlington Urban Agriculture Task Force back in 2013 when a previous board appointed me as chair and a number of other folks to decide such weighty issues as whether or not backyard hens should be legalized. Well, it ended up being kind of a bad yoke at the end, but we decided not to ruffle any feathers by further legalizing backyard hens. You can still have a backyard hen if you have an acre or more of property, but I'm not sure if anybody fits that bill here. Kim Klingler was in favor of legalizing backyard goats, but we all decided that that was a bad idea. Okay. Tonight's topic about the county board pay is important as we explore ways to strengthen both the quality and responsiveness of local government in these challenging times. A number of ideas have been floated in recent years. Some have suggested a mayor-city council form of government, like the district or the city of Alexandria. That would require state legislation. Now, Patrick Hope is here to help us out if it comes to that. We all know that while the state motto is Virginia is for lovers, Arlington has rarely been an object of love or affection from the Virginia General Assembly. And that's not likely to change anytime soon. And while it's understandable to consider Arlington more of a city than a county, there are significant and costly implications if we were to convert from being a county to a city. Other voices recommend that Arlington's 5 members, now elected at large, be expanded in number, possibly with some being at large and some by district. The argument is that districts would help ensure that certain constituencies and areas of the county would be better represented with districts. Of course, drawing district lines, as we know, is never an easy proposition. Take a look at the gerrymandering at the state legislative level and at the congressional level done by the Republicans and Democrats in Virginia and the Democrats in Maryland. Gerrymandering by party is an equal opportunity crime. It really boils down to whoever controls those magic markers. One relatively new notion is the idea of ranked choice voting, which typically means that you get to rank your candidates' preferences rather than making an all or nothing vote. Rank them 1, 2, 3, 4. The idea is that that might lead to more moderate politics and less polarization, because if a candidate is not your first choice, every candidate would like to be your second choice. Patrick, again, introduced legislation. I think you've introduced it for the second year in a row, Patrick, right? Where'd he go? Right? Okay. Right. Tonight's topic is another such idea. Should Arlington's board members be paid full-time workers? While reasonable people can differ, I am not in favor of a substantial pay hike for county board members. Why not? Let's dissect some of the arguments you've heard tonight and by others. Number one, probably the most common argument is that the county board members essentially work full-time now. Daytime, evening meetings and functions, weekends, regional meetings, and the like. Therefore, they deserve to be compensated full-time. The fact is, the county board has always been considered to be a part-time job, not a full-time sinecure to make a career from, even though some board members do treat it that way. Now, we should not be a hostage to history, but we should only change a fundamental form of government with serious deliberation and community input. Fundamentally, I believe that public office is a public service and involves some degree of sacrifice. A second argument is that it's just not fair for the county board members to work such long, stressful hours and not be adequately or fairly compensated. Well, first, a county board member knows exactly what he or she is getting into when they run for the job. They know exactly how much the pay is ahead of time. And if they're paying attention, they should have a pretty good idea of what the job entails and what the time commitments are. Board member schedules and calendars are an open book. Sometimes they're even subject to Freedom of Information Act requests. Board meetings are televised, many work sessions are televised, and board members reveal on social media virtually their every public moment. Second, pay alone is misleading, folks. Like county employees, county board members receive generous health care benefits. After 5 years, they vest in an equally generous retirement plan. There are numerous holidays, and while your calendar is constrained by briefings, work sessions, and many meetings, receptions, and other functions, you're in charge of your own vacations. And in fact, just last year, 3 of my former colleagues engaged in international travel. My idea of a vacation last year involved meeting with constituents on North Trinidad Street and Florida Street. You can take a county car on county business even. And for party animals, you could eat every meal out and have it paid for by others, provided you declare it and report it. The bottom line is if you're concerned about your income, but yet still want to engage in serious public service, as Libby noted, there's about 50 different county advisory boards and commissions that would love to have your time. Third, some argue that the need for outside income distracts from the job. I disagree. Having an outside job, provided it doesn't present a conflict of interest with county work, actually keeps one grounded and connected with the private sector. And it's a helpful reminder that many households today have people holding 2 or more jobs and challenges making household budgets on limited incomes. I was viewed by many as the most accessible and visible county board member, despite the fact that virtually every day of the week I spent several hours at my downtown law practice in the district. You do what you're elected to do, and you'd make the time to do it. Reason number 4. Then there's the contention that more generous pay, Libby suggested at least doubling it in 2016, would allow a younger, more diverse, less well-heeled group of people to helm the county. Yet look at the county board, folks. Currently, 3 people in their 40s, one of whom is African American, and 2 women, one just over 30 and one young at heart. 2 county board members are single, 2 have school-age children, and 1 has a brand new baby. From a geographic perspective, 2 live in North Arlington, 3 live in South Arlington. Mandatory financial disclosure forms reveal the income and assets of all board members, and none of them, nor I, can be considered wealthy. About the only thing that's now lacking on the Arlington County Board is a little political diversity. Number 5. Finally, the question of what is full-time pay? Where is that Goldilocks sweet spot of not too much, not too little, but just right? Whatever it is, I don't believe that outside income should be barred, as that would make the job much less attractive to many interested in public service. But I do think we should consider whether our existing conflict of interest laws are strong enough. And you only have to look across the river at the travails of Jack Evans, as Libby alluded to. While I don't favor anything more than a modest cost of living adjustment for board members for the reasons I outlined, I do think that we should begin a conversation about whether Arlington could benefit from expanding board membership to, say, 7 members with a combination of at-large and district seats. Think about it. You saw the chart. The city of Alexandria, Falls Church, and Fairfax City, all smaller than we are, all have 7 members, not 5. Loudoun, Prince George's, and Fairfax counties, all bigger than we are, have 9, 8, and 10 members, respectively. Expanded membership, with some by district, would, number 1, open opportunity for public service to many more people. Number 2, reduce campaign fundraising demands for those in the district seats. Number 3, spread board workload among more members, and I agree, Libby, that that is a challenge. And improve accountability by fostering greater connectivity and closeness between voters and their representatives by district. At the same time, having the chair, for example, elected countywide, like they do in Loudoun, Prince William, and Fairfax, would ensure that they have a broad countywide perspective. The other thing I would note in closing is when we talk about encouraging more candidates and more people to step up, we've had no shortage of qualified candidates whenever there's an open seat for a county board office or even school board. And in fact, we have 2 former county board candidates in the room tonight. I mentioned Kim Klingler earlier. Also, Chanda Chun is here. So there's a whole lot of talent in Arlington who are willing to do this job as a public service for the salary it is today. There's a lot to think about. There are no perfect answers. Thanks very much, and we look forward to your quips and your questions. Thank you.
I'm sure you know the tradition. Please ask the question in the form of a question. And who's first? Back there.
You mentioned conflicts of interest, and so you're not on the board now, so you may have a little bit more freedom, but you mentioned that the conflicts of interest rules may need to be reviewed. Specifically, what do you think should be reviewed, and while you were on the board, did you see any instances where you thought conflicts of interest were being particularly getting too close or skirting conflicts of interest?
I'm not sure how to quite answer that question, David. I will say this. There were several instances.
Hold closer.
Okay.
It's got to be. You got it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all
Let me
right.
know if I'm
better.
too loud. Anyway, there were several times. I'm a downtown commercial and multifamily real estate council. So we represent lenders on apartment buildings, nursing homes, hospitals, and so forth. There were several times that I had to recuse myself from a vote of the county board because one of my clients was making a loan on a particular housing project in Arlington. And so I consulted with the county attorney, declared that up front, filled out a form, and recused myself. A couple of the current board members have on an occasion also recused themselves, and so I think that honestly, our current county board and even previous county boards for the most part really have ethics beyond reproach. In terms of tightening things up, I guess the glib thing for me to say would be to read one of the columns of famed Arl Now columnist Peter Russillo, who's in the audience tonight, and who has written extensively on tightening up ethics laws, especially at the state level. I think it's really more important at the state legislative level than the county board level, but I think we could do a few more things here. I think it's really unfortunate, the situation over in the District of Columbia now with Jack Evans. None of the current county board members, and certainly I didn't reach out to the private sector and said, hey, I'm going to peddle my influence and, put me on a retainer and we'll work out an issue for you. That's very unfortunate. And so I think that people can earn outside income and within the four corners of the law, as long as they're on the up and up and declare what their conflicts may or may not be. There's financial disclosure forms that show where our income is coming from and so forth. And I don't know, I think probably we're going to want to give equal opportunity to
all I can say is anybody wants to see my taxes, you can see them.
Jean Broyhill, this is referring to something you said, John, but it's actually a question for both of you. John, you mentioned that if we had expanded board numbers, you had 7 people, and I think you meant 2 at large and 5 that had districts, that would reduce the cost of financing campaigns. How does that happen?
Well, first of all, if you had 7 members, you could really do it in any combination. You could have 6 by district, 1 at large, or you could have 5 by district, 2 at large, 3, 4, 4, 3. But the idea is obviously right now you have to campaign among 225,000 people clear across the county, and you need to raise a pretty hefty amount of money to reach that many people. If there were districts, depending on the size of the district, you're only reaching out to, you're only canvassing, you're only mailing to people in that district. So it would help, at least at the margins, in reducing the demand for campaign contributions and that dynamic, because you'd have a smaller district to campaign in.
So I'll just address that a little bit. I think in a county that is as small as Arlington, 26 square miles, having districts would be a tremendous problem, and really not, because then, as John said, it'd be a much smaller area. You're getting really small then. And I have watched Alexandria, where they have districts particularly for school board, and what I see is the people running for school board are relatively unsophisticated, and they make some big mistakes. Campaigns are really tough, but you learn a lot in a campaign, and it prepares you to be on a larger stage, which, as I've been trying to indicate when I just keep saying over and over again, 7th largest economy in the world, this region, we're on a much larger scale, and I think we need a very sophisticated county board, and someone who campaigns in just a tiny little area is not going to have the kind of outreach. The other thing is, part of our job is to represent, to make what's best for Arlington. If it was set maybe I represented Fairlington, and so everything I had to see it through the Fairlington lens, and sometimes there are things that might be good for Fairlington, but might not be so good for, maybe along Route 50 or something. But I'd have to represent Fairlington rather than what's good for the county as a whole. That would make me very uncomfortable. I think you want everybody representing the county as a whole, and I think you want fairly sophisticated, intelligent, and tough people representing us, because it's a tough world out there and we're on a big stage. And I think I don't think you begin to have the preparation. Finally, John, you said that you didn't want to fundamentally change the form of government. So everything you've proposed is a real fundamental change. Just increasing our pay so it's reasonable is not changing the form of government or anything. I could see going to maybe 7 members at some point, but I sure don't want to tackle that right now. I see us at a point where it is really getting problematic. And I will say younger people who have campaigned, yeah, they look at it and they can sort of see the job, but you don't get it until you actually get into the job. And I can tell you several have expressed shock at how much work it is and how hard it is, and nothing can prepare you for the kind of pushback you get. I woke up this morning to something on my phone, Twitter. Somebody accused me of lying on the Kojo Lamdi show. You know, I mean, it's constant, and you've got to be able to handle a lot of stuff, and it goes on all the time. And I think you want a county board that can do that. And I think you need a county board that will do it for a while. I also will say with my 23 years, I think I bring a tremendous amount of background and experience to the board, which is important. And you're right, a lot of people have been running, but a lot of people have been running. They had only lived in Arlington for like 2 or 3 years. A couple of years. A lot of the people running have not been here long. They're young, they're exciting, they've got some neat things, but I really don't think you want our county board to be made up mostly of people who just came here or who don't have some real solid experience. People with real solid experience are into their careers and they can't afford to take the break. Except unless you're a lawyer like John. Now, John did say he took we're not going to talk numbers, but John told me that he took a cut in his salary to be on the county board, and that cut was equal to more. I mean, you lost money. So the county board salary didn't make up for the money he lost. So you're in a nice position to have that.
Well, again.
And thank you for doing it. Thank you for doing it.
You know, we could go back and forth on this all night, but it is true. I mean, it was a sacrifice. It was a political sacrifice to me. I knew what I was getting into, and as I say, people in Arlington pay attention, and you're not paying attention if all of a sudden you wake up having been elected to elected office and say like Robert Redford did in the Candidate when he said. I'll never forget that scene when Robert Redford's sitting on the side of the bed and the TV declares him the winner and he says, "What do I do now?" You know, there's no excuse for that reaction.
No, but I think I remember you telling me it was more work than you thought. Certainly campaigning. This is tough. Yeah, it is.
Well, yeah, don't forget, I didn't have a party machine behind me. So
yeah, well, neither did
I had to work 10 times as hard as you guys.
So now, John,
but
I didn't have a party machine behind me either. In fact, the machine was against me too.
Not the first time,
Just
but then
saying.
you were enveloped. Anyway, so as far as districts are concerned, you know, it all depends on how many districts you go to. I mean, if we had 3 districts, you know, 3 goes into 225,000 what? 75,000. So each district would be about 75,000 people. That's just not a couple of neighborhoods. That's a big swath of the county. Now, the more districts you have, obviously, the smaller the districts would be. But I think the way you strike that balance is what you do is like Fairfax and some of the other counties where you have 1 or 2 members that are elected at large to bring that countywide perspective and the others by district.
Mr. Weistat, what do you say to some ideas about some of your arguments, one of which would be, you know, there's different layers of government, so to speak, in Arlington. You have the elected officials, but you also have the commissions, part of the entire governance structure. You have all the civic associations, which are geographic. You know, somebody would say, well, why do we need districts, and why shouldn't we forego the at-large board members, given that we have all these layers of kind of more niche things, either geographic niche in the civic associations or subject matter-wise as well?
I'm not sure that whether or not there's, I'm not sure that question is amenable to an answer on the basis of whether or not somebody's elected by district or at large. I would say, if anything, a district member could easily become familiar and acquainted with problems in other neighborhoods, issues across the county, issues that are not within their district, precisely with the help of those neighborhood associations and regional groups and so forth. I mean, I think Libby and I are in complete agreement that, you know, everything from the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission to the Northern Virginia Regional Commission to the Metropolitan Council Washington, Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, MCOG, they're all extremely important. And there are times when the board is stretched thin. But the board is stretched thin on those regional bodies not because we're not paid enough, but because there's only 5 board members.
So I'll argue, if you had 5 board members working full-time, that could at least double the amount of time we had in principle, right? So more people would be great, but more time would be even better. And it's
Well,
really hard to do it on a part-time
Yeah,
basis.
but don't forget, any of you, and Libby, you right now, and a couple of the other board members, essentially do work full-time.
Oh, well, of course we
So
do.
you're working full-time, and, you can go from one meeting to the next, to the next, to the next, and regardless of the pay, I guess is my point. So the issue, I think.
Yes, I can, and that's why I can make this argument, because I don't need it.
Well-
I've been doing it for a really long time. I'm watching our younger people, and I really, so, don't want to, you all remember Charles Monroe? Everybody was really worried about Charles, because he was partner in a law firm and working really hard and under a lot of stress. And there were people that told Charles that they would like to help, like, pay him something so that he wouldn't have to work so hard, and he refused to do it. I think it was the stress that killed him. He died at a board meeting. It was too much. I think we are asking too much of our younger members.
Hi, I'm Gail Dennis, one of those seniors that qualifies for tax relief, which apparently I make too much according to Libby Garvey, but anyhow. My question is, has the county board ever considered having a retreat to consider how many of the currently micromanaged items could be delegated to the county manager and therefore lighten their workload and therefore give them time for a second job?
Yeah, we've done that. We've actually streamlined the calendar quite a bit. And if you will notice consent items, we have a lot of consent items that we just do. There are always people that want to pull those consent items because they want to talk about it. And we generally let them, because we're serving people. And just because it's looks simple and quick to do, for that particular neighborhood or that particular neighbor, it's a big deal. And I believe that they need to have their day in court, if you will, or an ability to talk to us. And sometimes people have pulled consent items, come and pled their case before the board, and we've changed the county manager's recommendation because of what we hear then. So I think we do need to. And I never said anything about what you qualify for, Gail. I'm not sure what, anyway, we'll have to talk afterwards, because I don't make that decision anyway. That's above my pay grade. Yeah. You want to say anything?
Yeah, so Gail, that is a good question. And that is part of the natural tension, I think, that any county board member and probably any school board member faces is you want to understand the forest for the trees, but you also want to understand what's at ground zero and what's in the grassroots. And, Arlington is a very highly educated and sophisticated populace. You demand good services, quality services for the tax money that you pay. And that tax burden is increasing every year, and you want to know how it's spent, whether it's spent wisely, and so forth. So, I appreciate it when, when I used to get emails and telephone calls and a hand on my shoulder at the grocery store. Unlike George Bush, I do know what a gallon of milk sells for. But, the voters appreciate when their board members know a lot about everything. They want us probably to know maybe too much about everything, but
That's the point.
that type of connectivity is good, and I think for the most part, the board strikes a pretty good balance. And if we don't know the answer to a question, if I didn't know the answer to a question, if Libby doesn't know the answer to a question, we do go to our well-compensated 3,500 member professional staff.
Scott, I think you had a question behind you.
Hi there. I guess the question mostly for Ms. Garvey. So I lean towards in favor of part-time county board members, simply because I hope, at least, that it helps keep them connected to the community and involved in the community instead of being just career politicians. But with that said, I am open to much better pay for good work. I believe that good work should always be well compensated. However, how can it be justified for the county board to give themselves a pay raise when the county is still suffering from budget shortfalls? We're still continuously, it seems, increasing property tax rates, and we're about to give $23 million to Amazon. Shouldn't we, if we're going to be giving the county board, a lot of additional money, doubling their salaries or even more, shouldn't they be doing a good job of managing the county for that?
All right, so I think when we do our customer satisfaction surveys, people are pretty satisfied. I think we're doing a fairly good job. You argued that we want to stay in touch with people. What I was trying to present up there is much of the work we do is being in touch with people. And I do have people still, they complain, they don't get an email return fast enough, somebody wasn't at an event or whatever, because we had multiple other events and maybe somebody needed to be doing their job. So I'm looking for an ability for us to stay in touch because it's too hard. And in fact, what tends to go is you tend to be out with the community maybe when you're campaigning, but when you're struggling to keep your other job going and struggling to make sure that you get the site plans done and everything at our meetings and all of those regional stuff, what might slip is getting out into the community, and I don't think you want that. Finally, let's remember how much money this is, all right? Even if you doubled our salary, that's $55,000 times 5. That is a very small drop in a bucket. Remember the budget we're in charge of, $1.4 billion. The 5 of us are responsible to you for how $1.4 billion is spent. And you're saying we shouldn't be earning more than $55,000 a year? I really think there's something wrong with that picture.
Well, I think, Adam, you bring up an interesting question. I do think it's probably not feasible, of course, to calibrate the pay of our elected officials. By and large, I think we all feel, almost probably to every single individual in this room, that Arlington is a wonderful place to live. We've got our issues, we've got our warts, but I think the bottom line is most of our problems are first world problems. And I would ask yourself, do you really think that you would have a materially better board with materially better performance if the board members' pay was doubled or tripled or quadrupled? I don't think so.
So I think it gets down to, again, what kind of a board do you want and who do you want to be running for the board? And as I tried to show with a slide, and I'm sorry, I had first, when I got on the board, all baby boomers, nobody worked outside income because you didn't have to. My husband and I bought in Fairlington in 1977. We stayed in a townhouse, raised the kids in a townhouse. We only had one car because Kenan rode a bike. We saved a lot of money. We did fine. I'm very comfortable with that. But people today, young people today, have college debts. They have all kinds of debt. They cannot buy a house and settle here and have kids on that small an income. You've got to have 2 substantial salaries to make it here. And again, what kind of board do you want to have? We are going toe to toe with executives at Amazon, with executives at Nestle. We're working with the governor. We're on the national stage, and I think at our meeting on Saturday, that probably will end up being on the global stage. It's not a part-time job. You want full-time professionals because this county deserves full-time professionals. And again, we are the heart of the 7th largest economic region in the world. We right now bat below our weight. Remember all those empty buildings in Crystal City? Once Amazon comes and we start getting the synergies, we're going to be a much larger economic force than that. I think this region will bump up several steps. Do you want a 5-member part-time board just like we had in the 1930s?
Well,
it's not going to work. I'm saying we can't be continuing. I'm trying to sort of raise, if you will, the issue and the alarm. We're making it now. It gets harder and harder. I don't believe it can be continued if we want to keep on the level that we need to be and to provide you with the kind of service I think you deserve and want.
Well, maybe we should also be discussing term limits tonight. But the fact of the matter is again, I don't believe that paying the board substantially more will materially change this government. The board works extremely hard. Yes. They can earn outside income. Some choose to, some don't. You look at members of Congress. Now, we probably pay the man in the White House too much. We probably don't pay the Congress enough. But the fact is that, the Congress can, even though honoraria are banned, congressmen can earn outside income up to a point. Some choose to, some choose not to. But let your elected official decide what sort of outside income they want. Watch them, and vote them in or vote them out.
So I didn't say people couldn't earn outside income, and I get that would have affected you quite a bit. All I'm saying is that you should be able to make it and survive doing this job
I don't-
full time if you want to. And
well,
then let me just say, so
yeah.
remember the story I told you about Christian Dorsey? It is a huge deal that he could be chair of Metro. That would be great for the region. That would be great for Metro. It would be great for us here in Arlington. And I'm telling you, because he doesn't make enough money, he cannot afford to do it. That's the first big sign that we're doing something wrong, in my humble opinion.
Okay, so
sorry,
not to belabor this, but let's look at at what the other in Fairfax County. Let's say Christian was a member of the Fairfax County Board. Could he do it on $95,000 a year, which is what the Fairfax County Board member is paid? I mean, how much is too much?
All right, I'm going to have
Or
to
too little.
I'm going to have to bring this to a close because
Oh,
that
hey,
clock
Sandra.
is supposed to say 9 o'clock, but it doesn't because someone hasn't set that yet. First of all, let me please join me in thanking our speakers, Libby Garvey and Sean Weisstadt.
We are happy to continue this conversation. Is the bar still open?
I think you're going to close them out. They bicker back and forth like the two brothers from Car Talk. I was at the table. I know this for a fact.
See, in Arlington, we really can have civil disagreements.
We can.
I'd like you to come next month because we'll have another discussion, maybe with even livelier discussion. Who knows? It'll be about alternative transportation modes, namely bicycle and scooter sharing. So you can make your reservations at arlingtoncommitteeof100.org, and based on that knowing groan, I know you'll all be here. I'd also like to thank the program committee for putting this together, in particular Scott Pedowitz for coming up with the idea for tonight's program. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the people who worked the front desk, Anita Nolan, Jeannie Broyhill, and Marjorie Hobart, and of course Kim Klingler for selling the drink tickets in the back. Thanks also to the Marymount Special Events team and Arlington Independent Media. Remember, you can watch tonight's program on AIM's channel and via our YouTube channel.